concern. They could spike further.
Meanwhile, German authorities in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia have reimposed lockdown restrictions in 2 districts after a spike in cases. In the UK, health leaders have cautioned authorities to prepare for the real risk of a second wave of the virus.
Moving on, Kabul says 10 security forces have been killed in a Taliban attack in Afghanistan's western Badghis province. An Afghan lawmaker said 5 others were wounded in clashes in Bala Murghab district of the province. He said 7 commandos and 3 soldiers were killed in the attack. He said the clashes continued for more than 2 hours. The Taliban have not yet commented over the development. Meanwhile, 6 civilians were killed in a roadside mine blast in Jawzjan province. The provincial officials said 2 children and a woman were among those killed in the blast. Now, Syria says it responded to Israeli strikes on southern, central and eastern parts of the country. In a statement, the Syrian army said 2 of its soldiers have been killed and 4 others wounded in strikes on an installation in the southern town of Salkad. The military said Israeli jets also hit an army outpost in Salamia and another in Sabura town in Hama province. The bases are in zones in eastern and southern Syria, which Israel had hit in recent months. State media said the missiles came through east and northeast of Palmyra city. The Israeli army declined to comment over the development. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on Israel to abandon its plans to annex settlements in the occupied West Bank. The UN chief's comments come after over 1,000 European lawmakers urged their leaders to stop Israel's planned annexation. In a letter sent to European foreign ministers, the parliamentarian said such a move will be fatal to the prospects of peace between Israel and Palestine. The letter said the parliamentarians were deeply worried about the precedent this would set for international relations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu intends to kickstart the annexation process next week after clinching a deal with his former rival last month. Speaking at the UN Security Council, Guterres said the move will constitute a series of violations of international law.
Israel's threat to annex parts of the occupied West Bank has alarmed Palestinians, many Israelis, and the broader international community. If implemented, annexation would constitute the most serious violation of international law, grievously harm the prospect of a 2-state solution, and undercut the possibilities of a renewal of negotiations.
Thousands of Israeli protesters have demonstrated against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plans to annex the occupied West Bank. In Tel Aviv, the protesters called for a 2-state solution and opposed Netanyahu's seizure plans. The demonstrators said they are afraid of the annexation's consequences of starting a big war in the region. They criticized Netanyahu's policies and called for a democratic process. Meanwhile, over 1,000 parliamentarians from across Europe have signed a letter strongly opposing Israeli annexation plans. The letter raised serious concerns about the proposals and calls for commensurate consequences. Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio has arrived in Tripoli to meet Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj of Libya's UN-backed government. In a statement, the government of national accord said the 2 officials discussed foreign intervention in Libya. The 2 sides also examined Italian assistance with mine clearing in Tripoli. Meanwhile, Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay has said that international law will determine Libya's future. Earlier, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called for an immediate ceasefire in Libya. He said that Turkey and Egypt agreed with Moscow's approach to the settlement of that conflict. Moving on, the Arab League has called for a political solution for the Libyan crisis in accordance with the Berlin Conference and the Cairo Declaration. In a virtual meeting called by each of the League's foreign ministers discussed the reservations of the government of national accord on the Cairo Declaration. In a statement, Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait said Libya is passing through a dangerous turn in the course of its conflict. He said the military option will not achieve victory for any side and will not bring peace or establish stability on the Libyan soil. Responding, the GNA has criticized the Cairo-based league, accusing it of having double standards. The foreign ministry said the league's sessions have been called without the required quorum. Meanwhile, Libyan army said it discovered 3 unidentified bodies in an area south of the capital, Tripoli. After a week of escalating tensions and leveling threats, North Korea has suspended plans for military actions against South Korea. State media said the decision was taken in a military commission meeting chaired by Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un after taking the prevailing situation into consideration. Meanwhile, South Korea said it's closely reviewing Pyongyang's decision to suspend military action plans. Unification Ministry spokesperson Yoo Sang-ki reiterated Seoul's commitment towards keeping inter-Korean agreements.
The government's original stance that inter-Korean agreements must be kept remains unchanged. Apart from this is a reminder that activities which cause tensions between the two Koreas and pose risk to the safety of residents in the border area, such as releasing anti-North Korea leaflets, will continue to be sternly dealt with.
대처해 나갈 방침임을
Iran has warned the IAEA to expect a stern response regarding the agency's demands for Tehran to provide access to nuclear sites. In a televised speech, President Hassan Rouhani said a harsh response is easy for Iran, but it prefers cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog. He said Iran is still ready to accept legal surveillance by the agency and will continue close cooperation within the legal framework of the 2015 nuclear deal. Iran has dismissed allegations of nuclear activities at the site. Rouhani's remarks come after the watchdog adopted a resolution last week demanding access to the site. The resolution was proposed by Germany, France and the United Kingdom, while Russia and China voted against it. Turkey says its soldiers has been killed in southeastern Hakkari province after coming under fire from the Iranian side of the border. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the soldier succumbed to his wounds after getting injured during a surveillance activity. It said 2 other soldiers have been wounded in the border town of Yuksekova by a harassment fire from Iranian direction. The ministry did not say who had shot at the soldiers. Turkey has been fighting with the Kurdistan Workers' Party along with its border with Syria and Iraq for decades, but a casualty report from the Iranian border region is very rare. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has called for Berlin to play a more prominent role in security alliance. Stoltenberg's comments followed US President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Germany.
The NATO chief sat down for an interview at a time when cohesion between member states is under the radar. Stoltenberg said the world needs more German leadership, and NATO expects Germany to play an even more important role in shaping the course of the alliance. He said Germany now has the largest defense budget in the EU, and third in NATO, behind the UK and the US. Stoltenberg said he urged Trump to maintain presence of US troops in Europe prior to the official announcement of troops withdrawal. He said the presence of troops is important for security for both the US and Europe, as peace and stability in Europe adds to the security of North America. Meanwhile, White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien said troops withdrawn from Germany may be redeployed to Indo-Pacific. He said troops will be redeployed to confront China, which is part of Trump's great power competition under his strategic vision for the future.
Peaceful demonstrations against police brutality and racism in the United States continue for the 29th day since the custodial killing of George Floyd. Protesters in Washington, D.C., Oakland and Seattle marched through the streets to demand widespread police reform and racial justice.
As the Black Lives Matter protests continue, in Washington, protesters called for Emancipation statue to be taken down, depicting former President Abraham Lincoln and an African American. Elsewhere in Oakland, California, young protesters marched to demand the removal of police from schools ahead of the district school board vote on the issue. Meanwhile, Seattle police reported the 3rd shooting in the so-called Capitol Hill organized protest zone, a day after the city vowed to take back the area. Over in Kentucky, the Louisville Metro Police Department fired Brett Hankinson, one of the police officers involved in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. At Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church, friends and family members paid tribute to Rayshard Brooks, who was shot dead by police on 12th of June. In a fiery speech, civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Bernice King, urged demonstrators to keep marching until Black lives actually begin to matter.
Don't you stop until Black Lives Matter in every state, in every city, in every hamlet, in every village, in every sector of American society, and ultimately the world. And I close that in honor of Ahmaud Arbery, in honor of Breonna Taylor, in honor of George Floyd, in honor of Rayshard Brooks, and countless others. Don't stop until it matters that dignity, justice, and equity are a reality for all Black lives. Rayshard Brooks' death will not be in vain, because justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Earlier, Twitter placed another warning notice on President Donald Trump's post, threatening serious force against the protesters in the US Capitol.
More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Now, a US Navy ship has navigated near the Venezuelan coast a day after an Iranian cargo ship docked at a port of the South American country. The Southern Command said the USS Nets sailed outside Venezuela's territorial waters, some 12 nautical miles from its coast. The command said it held freedom of navigation operation within an area of the Venezuelan government falsely claims to have control over. This comes after Washington said it was deploying assets to the Caribbean amid economic sanctions and alleged narcotics shipments. Last month, Iran sent fuel shipments to the oil-starved OPEC nation as Washington threatened stern measures but took no military action. Now, a powerful earthquake of 7.4 magnitude has struck southern Mexico's Pacific coast, killing at least 6 people. The earthquake swayed buildings in Mexico City and sent thousands fleeing into the streets. Government agency said La Crucecita was the epicenter of the earthquake. About 200 houses in the area have been damaged, including 30 badly impacted. The state governor of Oaxaca, Alejandro Murat, said the hospitals are dealing with the situation adequately.
The damages to the hospitals in the Central Valley and the IMSS Public Hospital in Huatulco are not structural damages, and they can continue working. As of 300 in the afternoon, we can confirm that communications and basic services like electricity and water are all 95% re-established, and what's left will be attended to by tonight.
Now, China National Biotech Group has secured approval to run a large-scale phase 3 clinical trials of its COVID-19 vaccine in the United Arab Emirates. The country is conducting trials of potential vaccines abroad because of a lack of new patients at home. The commencement ceremony for the clinical trial of the inactivated COVID-19 vaccine was held in Beijing. Chairman of Sinopharm Group, Liu Jingzhen, said the third phase of the trial could take up to 6 months.
During the fight against the epidemic in China, we are all in a state of war. We need to handle certain cases with certain measures. I believe that the third phase of clinical trials will take about half a year, and we will achieve a satisfactory result.
Russia has marked the 75th anniversary of the World War II Victory Day with a military parade in Moscow. The annual parade commemorates the victory parade staged by the USSR back in 1945. More in this report.
The annual parade was held in Red Square, which featured about 14,000 military personnel, 234 armored vehicles, and 75 aircraft performing traditional fly-past. The parade included units from most of ex-Soviet republics, as well as from China, Mongolia, and Serbia. In his address from Red Square, Russia's President Vladimir Putin paid tribute to the soldiers who laid down their lives. He said it should be remembered that the Soviet people held the main burden in the fight against Nazism in 1941. Putin said Russia will never forget the contribution of allies on the path to victory and honor the brave fighters of all states of the anti-Hitler coalition.
Hurrah!
Germany's top court has ruled Facebook should suspend combining users' data from WhatsApp and Instagram without explicit consent. In a fast-track proceedings, Federal Court of Justice backed country's antitrust agency amid a larger court battle. Chief Judge Peter Beck said Facebook is using its dominant position to force users into giving up their data without giving any choice. While Facebook said main proceedings before a court of appeals are ongoing and it will continue to defend its position that there is no antitrust abuse. It said the verdict is only about the preliminary proceedings and there will be no immediate changes for its users in Germany. In 2019, Germany's Federal Cartel Office pulled brakes on Facebook's data collection and threatened billions in fines if the company failed to comply. In Switzerland, an acrobatic show stunned the audience as daredevils gave record performances in Les Diables Rets. The Swiss Glacier 3000 organized the show to support the artists impacted by the pandemic all over the world. More about the amazing art in this report.
Circus performances have been cancelled around the world due to the coronavirus pandemic, but one acrobat has kept the dream alive with a death-defying Wheel of Death stunt in the Swiss Alps. Acrobat Freddie Knock, one of the organizers, broke 3 records during his performance. He maintained balance for 40 meters on a slope, rode a bike on a cable car for 367 meters, and walked blindfolded on the same cable for 151.1 meters. Knock says he wants to try performing on a hot air balloon at an altitude of 5,000 meters.
I show stuff nobody did before, and for sure new ideas is in the head now and you can go further and further. And my next project is like I go on the hot air balloon. I want to try 5,000 meters underneath. I have something underneath while I do the blindfold and the bike, and without balancing pole cross 20 meters.
Other acrobats like Swiss trapeze artist David Maillard hanged at the cable car 200 meters above the ground. Ramon Catheriner performed on the Wheel of Death with the Swiss Alps in the background. Knock believes in the time of crisis, it is the artists who can bring life back to the people.
Singers, artists, theater, for me it's all the artists and performer. When you think about like in the old time when the war was, the artists bring life back in to the people.
Knox says by these tough performances, he wanted to highlight the struggle.
The US says it will cut off its economy from Beijing if American firms are not allowed to compete on a fair and level basis in China. Speaking virtually at an event, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said Washington expects Beijing to abide by the terms of the Phase 1 trade agreement. Mnuchin said a level playing field with Chinese companies presents a great opportunity for the growing middle class in both countries. He also called for a massive increase in Chinese purchases of US goods, energy and services. Britain's Trade Minister Liz Truss says the UK has no deadline to strike a trade deal with the United States. Addressing a parliamentary committee, the minister also criticised the US for restricting import access. Britain left the EU earlier this year and is now in the process of negotiating bilateral trade deals with major partners like the United States. Truss said the reality is that many UK products have been kept unfairly out of US markets. She added that the UK will be tough in pressing its interests. Earlier, a spokesman for Prime Minister Boris Johnson said talks were continuing at a good pace and that the current round was due to end this week. EU's negotiator Michel Barnier says a failure to agree a post-Brexit trade deal with the bloc will hurt the British economy more. Speaking to a forum via video link, Barnier said it is London's interest to avoid a no deal. Barnier added that the role of the EU Court of Justice was also problematic in talks. The chief negotiator said EU insists on Britain's commitment to the European Convention of Human Rights. Barnier called on Britain to implement last October's deals governing the Irish border. It's because the EU wants strict customs checks and tariffs on some goods coming from mainland Britain into Northern Ireland. The IMF has lowered its global growth forecast for this year and next in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. It said the global output will shrink by 5% this year. In an update of its World Economic Outlook forecast, the IMF said recovery in 2021 will also be weaker. It said a major new outbreak next year could shrink the year's growth to a barely perceptible 0.5%. The finance body said advanced economies have been particularly hard hit, with US output likely to shrink by 8%. Latin American economies saw some of the largest downgrades, with Brazil's economy contracting over 9%. The IMF said China is the only major economy now which is expected to show positive growth in 2020. US stocks fell over fears about the increasing number of newly confirmed coronavirus cases. Traders are now more concerned about the economic reopening and recovery. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is trading lower by about 2%. The S&P 500 is also trading lower by about 2%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index is trading lower by about 1.5%. European stocks also traded lower on Wednesday due to a surge in coronavirus cases in the US and beyond. Meanwhile, gold prices surged to their highest in nearly 8 years, while global shares cooled as increasing infections kept investors on the edge. Now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, with the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can always follow us on social media at Indus News. Take care.